right, so a very warm welcome to everyone. We already received a couple of, oh, I'm here, hello from Finland, I think, and I saw a couple, I think I saw one person from Germany and from France, and so welcome everyone. This is the, I guess, one of the greatest advantages of this pandemic. The pandemic has brought us that we are able to gather around, spanning several countries and even continents. And we are very grateful that Romain got up at 5:30 today to be with us. We have more from Canada. Excellent. Very welcome. So what we like to do today is I'll make a really brief discussion about myself and Romain, and then Romain will present the article in focus, which we're going to discuss today, and then we'll jump into a very nice Q&A session. And please feel free to address any questions you might have. So write them in the chat and we'll kind of incorporate them in our discussion. So my name is Katharina Hölzler. I'm a professor for IT entrepreneurship at the Hasso-Plattner Institute in Potsdam, so part of the University of Potsdam. And I'm also editor-in-chief for the journal Creativity and Innovation Management since 2015, together with Jenny Björk and Harry Bohr. And well, apart from that, I'm doing several other things, but that doesn't really matter today because the person in focus today is Romain Rampin, and he actually has two bachelor degrees, one from France, from Paris, University Paris-Dauphine, and also another bachelor degree from the University of Quebec at Montreal. And he continued his educational voyage with a master's degree in international business. And apparently he really convinced his professors, because he not only got several scholarship and a doctoral entrance award, but also continued with scholarship for his PhD. And he, I think, has just recently finished his PhD thesis on the topics of creativity and innovation management. And what makes him as a researcher unique is that he really knows his base theory, literature, the overall body of knowledge in creativity and innovation management, but he also knows how to apply it in practice. And the article we're going to talk about today is one excellent example of this theoretical knowledge put into practice by using a design that we always read in articles in further research that the authors write, yes, we should do longitudinal research to actually better understand the topic at hand. And this is what Romain has been doing in his PhD thesis, part of his PhD thesis. He's also a teacher and an educator, teaching the management of innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship and business models, and a very nice masterclass, I think, which unfortunately is in French, I think, on idea management with Nagar. Unfortunately, I would have loved to listen to that. And last but not least, he is an entrepreneur. And I think you received also an educator's or an entrepreneur award, right?
Yeah, a long time ago, before I decided to do my PhD.
Well, but that kind of shows that you are ambidextrous, right? You know the practice and you know the theory. So, Romain, your article has just recently been published by our journal in January. I think 4th of January, it was finally accepted. And there were a couple of things that not only the reviewers, but especially us as editors liked about your paper, and I think we're going to unfold this along the go. So may I ask you to give a short abstract introduction into the article itself.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Katarina, for this great introduction. I could have done it better myself. So if I want to talk a little bit about our paper that I co-author with Marina Goguet, which was supposed to be here, but had a great news recently. She just gave birth, so I'm representing the both of us today. So the articles that we wrote with Marine, who was my PhD supervisor at the time, discuss the effect of devices that organization can put in place in order to develop radical innovation capabilities. And in fact, what we have looked at during our research is the effect over time of training to methods of creativity and innovation. And what we have observed is that more and more organizations were trying to implement that and to mobilize this kind of devices in order to develop new innovation capabilities. But the literature was quite silent on the concrete effect and also through the means through which they really act in practice. So with Marine, we really wanted to understand a little bit more this phenomena, and so we were lucky enough to come across an extremely fertile case with the Institute of Research of Hydro-Quebec. For those who don't know Hydro-Quebec, it's an organization that has a monopoly in the transportation, production, and distribution of energy in Quebec. And so we were dealing with an organization that in the energy industry that have been facing more and more difficulties in adapting to a new dynamic environment. And so they had decided to a new director to implement a training to their researchers to innovation and creativity method and theories, and in particular to train a fifth of their employees. And so with Marine, with that in mind, we conducted a longitudinal research to look at the effect of training over time, taking care to collect as much data as we could before, during, and even after the training. And for those who wanted to know the result and the contribution, you can read the papers that I think Stefan and the collective has already sent you. But what we have tried to show is that there is indeed many positive impacts at the individual, collective, and organizational level from this training in order to overcome some of the inhibiting factors that organizations often deal with in trying to develop major innovation. And this effect, especially, en fait, persists over time. And so the longitudinal aspect of the study especially allow us to have some surprises on the field and to discover effects that have not been anticipated by the literature, such as the development of a new collective that after the training were developed in order to share the good practice and knowledge on exploration method, or the effect that was not anticipated on the motivation to innovate that the training courses had on many employees.
Right.
So that's
the overall story. Right. Thank you, Roman. Now, if we kind of dissect the paper and the research a little bit, there were a couple of things we really liked as editors in your paper. And I start with the first part. So we all know innovation is so hard for organizations. And, you know, I guess all of us here in the room, we are almost 50 now, have seen this one hand or the other. So organizations struggle with innovation. Innovation is hard, innovation is not welcome. And what makes it so difficult for us as researchers is that innovation happens on 3 levels. So on an individual level, on a collective or team level, and on the organizational level. And you address in your research all 3 levels, which we thought, and I still think is quite amazing, because more often than not, there's only one level addressed in research. So either we as researchers talk to the individuals, or we try to take a proxy from an organizational level. However, I think that is already the first challenge, right? How do you address 3 levels at once? So what were the challenges there? I mean, can we really assume that by talking to people, we actually get a good understanding of the organizational level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and but first of all, I want to insist that this is we did that because we did a longitudinal case study, and we could have done that otherwise. For example, if we only have done like interviews, we couldn't have access, I think, to these 3 layers at the individual, collective, and organizational level. And so, yes, there were a lot of difficulty in collecting data that address like these 3 levels, especially since at the beginning, we didn't know that we were to tackle all these three levels. And so for the individual part, it was quite easy, because we conducted a lot of interviews, and we had access to all the comments and questions that the participant asked during the training, and we also had access to observation of them doing like practice and experimenting with new methods and theories. What was more difficult is to access the collective aspect. And for that, I think you need to be on the field and to follow some teams. And during the training, we created some teams that stayed even after the training on different subjects that the organization wanted to explore. And so with Marine, we follow this team during the training and even a few months afterwards to see how they evolve, what kind of methodology did they use, with what is, and the discussions they were having together. And I think for the last part, the organizational level, you need to have a lot of data, and you need to triangulate multiple sources of data in order to access this kind of organizational level that you cannot access otherwise with qualitative data. I think it's quite easy for a quantitative researcher to address this level, because you have macro data on the organization, its performance, its strategy, its patent, and so on. But when you're doing some qualitative work, you need to triangulate a lot of different sources of data in order for example, for us to see that a language to talk about innovation was like disseminating through the organization. Right. And we had multiple sources of data that show towards these factors. But you need to triangulate a lot of period of times and different sorts of data in order to prove that you in fact have an organizational phenomenon. So that was quite a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. And there's actually already an additional question from Katarina. And she asked, how did you, now using all these data, then approach a multi-level theorizing? So could you actually, if you could share some insights, how did you theorize then coming from your data across the levels back to theory? Because that obviously is quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's also a great question, because I think part of the other challenges that you encounter when you do a longitudinal study is to analyze the data, because it's quite messy. It's very rich. With Marine, we collected I think 360, more than 360 pages of observation notes, and with transcription of interviews as well, and a lot of secondary sources. And so first we went deep into our data, trying to see how to approach it and how to reduce it. And so for that, we try to construct some narrative at first, and to look at it with different perspectives from the literature. Second, what I did, and what I think is of a great value for the paper, is that since we collected data at different moments of time, I decided to organize this data by column in an Excel spreadsheet, to see the evolution of the participant discourses and behavior over time. And so I organized this Excel with all of the participants, another page for the teams, and another page for organizational aspect that we wanted to see. And that's when we saw this thing emerge progressively.
Right. Yeah, that is very interesting, because I think that is a great way of splitting, but then also bringing together. And I think in your article, you show at several stages how you actually look at the individual phenomena, but then also how this actually relates to the collective and the organizational level. I'm just thinking of, there's one table, I think, in the article where you describe the individual effects, and also then for the collective and the organizational level. And there's also this final overview of your, basically your research model, where you show that the individual has skills and motivation, and the team has a socialization, but also collective tools to use, and the organizational also creates this common language. And then this all relates to actually overcoming the 4 factors, or those 4 major inhibitors you identified at first in your theoretical part, and you show how these then overcome those inhibitors. So I remember that this was something that we really liked, because it makes it so clearly visible for the reader how those levels differentiate, and then how they relate. Because that, and that would be one question from my side. Now, being a researcher in the area of barriers to innovation myself, but usually focusing a lot more on the individual level barriers. So, you know, people don't having the expertise, the knowledge, you name it. You identified in the beginning those 4 inhibitors, like fixation effects, organizational resistance, restrictive evaluation criteria, and this whole rigid organizational culture. And the experience I have made as a researcher, that barriers to innovation are always very individual. So you see other barriers than I see. So how did this play out in your research? You started, I mean, you start with the organizational inhibitors, but I would expect that when you talk to the people, they would also give you their individual impression of it, right?
I'm sorry, Catherine. Do you hear me? Because I have problem hearing you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Should I repeat?
Yeah, just the last part of the question, because
Right.
I think my internet connection was unstable.
Okay, so my question was, you in your theoretical part, you very nicely show those 4 inhibitors: fixation effects, organizational resistance, and how did these 4 organizational inhibitors play out when you talk to the individuals?
Okay, it's actually a great question, because there's 4 inhibitors I did found before the research, by doing my the first review of the literature on innovation and what they call innovation capabilities beforehand. And so I had that in mind during the research, and I was looking in particular to this constraint. And it was not always clear that because I had like a lot more constraint and factors inhibiting major innovation. And you know that there is many more, and you name some of them also. But we only kept the one that made sense from our data, from our data set. So when we're listening to the data, we saw that, okay, there is something about overcoming the fixation effect at the individual level that is major. There is something about changing the culture of the organization and trying to create new routines that are less rigid. And so that's when discussing with Marine, we came up with all this element relating to our observation. And that's I think part of the job to do like inductive research. You have to be inductive, but to be deductive as well, and to combine this 2 perspectives on the same.
Yes. Yeah, right. Thank you. So looking a little bit more on the research side now. Now we hopefully kind of, got a good understanding of where your theory came from and kind of where you started. So you write in your article that Hydro-Quebec approached you in 2015, or they decided in 2015 to have a training for innovation, which fits very well with your theory that actually an innovation capability for an organization can only be developed if the individuals learn how to do it. So did they approach Marine HEC to do this training, or how did this connection happen, and how did
Katarina, I don't hear you. I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but there is some lag in the connection. I don't know if it's me.
I don't know either. So how is it for the others? Do you hear me well?
Yeah, Roman, it's your connection. I can hear Katerina very well.
Okay. So could you just repeat a little bit the question, Katerina? I'm so sorry this happened.
No problem. Maybe I'll just ask shorter questions. So Hydro-Quebec decided to do this learning approach. Did they approach HEC, Marine, you? How did this first connection start? And second, when did you decide to make a research project out of it?
Okay. That's a great question. So Hydro-Quebec approached Marine at first because they had a contact with her back from when she did a PhD at Mines Paris Tech, And so when she was at Mian Paritech, she did a learning expedition in Canada, in Montreal. And so they had this connection, and they knew about marine capability of developing a training that combine different sort of method and theory related to innovative design, their work on fixation and so on. And so they approached Marine and another Montrealer researcher, that name is Christophe Abrassard, to do this training. And I think that Marine, from the beginning, wanted to do a research of the effect of this training.
Okay.
And so Marine approached me. I was not in the beginning of my PhD at the time. I will just start, and I didn't choose my PhD supervisor, and so we had a nice fit. And she told me I get an opportunity to study for maybe 2 months, a training for creativity and innovation, and I don't know what will emerge out of it, but I think it will be a great opportunity for you to see, because in this organization I can see that they want to implement some major change, and so she's got this intuition, but nothing more. And we had this 9-day training with the 20 participants, and we decided to do a baseline before, and to see to better understand their context before the training. So we decided to, before the training, doing a series of interviews, and we started with Marine with the idea of collecting as much data as possible, so that at the end we will not find ourselves saying that we should have captured this or that thing that was missing. So it was a very a grounded approach at first, with a more generalized question about what kind of effect will happen from this training. And we decided not only to conduct interviews at different moments of time with the participants, but also to document their behavior and their conversation and questions during the training. And I think for that, the guess of Marine, it was to from the start say we need a neutral researcher doing this kind of data collection and observation. So I was there during the training, but I did not participate. Okay. I did not do any animation of the team. I did not do the training presentation. I was just there to observe and to collect data. And so I had a lot of time to collect copious, to take copious note of the questions, the evolution of their behavior, and so on. And it was not anticipated that the study will last more than a year to complete. So the longitudinal aspect, in fact, appear during during the event. And I had planned for a much shorter story initially, to document the effect of the training on the changes in the participant posture, for example. But 1 month after the first training session ended, we had the opportunity to follow with Marine several teams in their exploration and to exchange with them. And we started to see some surprises emerge. And in fact, I remember we were invited to this event where different teams presented their first result and the difficulties that they had encountered in doing their exploration on these various subjects. And the meeting ended with several employees expressing this desire to create a monthly event, a more regular event, to share their experience in exploring and developing major innovation. And so at the end, with Marine, we discussed in the car going back home, and we said, like, there is something in this field that is quite surprising questions, quite extraordinary, that we wanted to pursue further. And that's at this moment that we decided to organize a second cohort, a second training session, discussing with the organization and to take this research further and doing a longitudinal research for more than a year, I think.
Right. And that actually fits very well to another question we have from the audience, from Pavel. And Pavel Rytala asked, when we look at your longitudinal study, and you also have this one figure in your article, you have those 4 phases. So it was very clear, organized, you have a clear multi-stage research design. So Pavel's question is, how can you think about how your design and the results might be different if you hadn't have those clear 4 phases of 2 training interventions and the reflection period? I mean, sometimes you know, can we think about a longitudinal design where events just come and go? Do you think that there would be a difference?
That's actually a nice comment, because I think that for most longitudinal study, you cannot have such a nice organized design.
Yes, right.
And what I'm trying to tell you is that our design was grounded, was not planned from the start.
Right.
So we didn't start with, oh, we will do that for a year with all these different nice steps. And so that's the reflexive and back-end part of it. When we look at our data and we said, oh, okay, we did that, and I think we did that quite well. But when we have discussion with Anne Langlais, for example, that is conducted a lot of longitudinal study, what she will tell you is that most often, looking at longitudinal studies, the interesting aspect is that you don't know what kind of event will be relevant to the study.
Yes, exactly.
And so it's because you are in the field for a long period of time that you could afterwards, in a retrospective way, look at your data and say, this event were the most important, and this event where changes occur, or this was a tipping point, this was a key phenomena to observe. But you cannot know that in advance. And I think that's part of the value of longitudinal study, because you do longitudinal work to explore new phenomena, to see new variation, new changes, surprises emerge. And so you don't know in advance what you are trying to discover exactly. And that's part of the richness of the methodology.
Yes.
But I think the challenge is doing that is you have to be sure, you have to be sure that your case is relevant to the phenomenon you are trying to discover. Right. And so you must select your case very carefully and be able to say, okay, maybe there is not enough material in the case that I'm studying, and stop it if you see this kind. Right.
And I would also, I completely agree. And I would also expect that, I mean, people always think that qualitative research is easier than quantitative, but I think the way you described it already shows that one of the major challenges of qualitative research is the data, the messiness of the data. So I would expect now, the way you described it, that you documented events and you saw trigger points, but looking retrospectively, those trigger points might or might not have actually been trigger points, right? So you analyze the data at one point in time, but then you reanalyze the data a second time and a third time and a fourth time, right? Oh, he's frozen. Oh, okay. Are you back? Yes.
Yeah, but I think I heard most of your question.
Okay.
So yeah, you have to do this kind of analyzing at first, but analyzing afterward also, because at first when you are on the field, you have this intuition that something is happening, but it's only looking back at your data that you can see if, when and why this phenomena emerge. Like for example, I remember very well that with Marine, at one point in the training, we saw the participant posture evolve drastically. Like I think was between the fifth and the sixth session. But we only got this intuition that something was happening. And looking back at the data, I remember I was like, oh, no. The discourse and behavior of the participant didn't evolve between the fifth and the sixth. It evolved gently between the fourth and the sixth. And you can see a gap like, in the fifth session. But in the fifth session, they were already more mature in doing some facilitation with each other in exploring various subjects. So you have this intuition, but you have to go back to your data and I think you go back with a different perspective from the literature in order to be able to interpret and see this event.
Yeah, I agree. So Pavel comments on your reply. So he thanks you, but he sees, so he says you did the Langlian temporal bracketing based on key stages so that you identified ex post. So, but he still has the feeling that it helps to have a case where a clear organizational intervention takes place. And I guess we can say yes to it, although I personally have seen longitudinal studies where they really go from event to event, so really from trigger events, and then unfold, the data unfolds quite differently. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think Pavel has a point. Thank you so much, Pavel, for the question. You can do both, and I think you can try to organize some of it and say I will have some period of time where I will collect data. And for example, the last data collection 1 year after the training, that we planned very carefully, and we had a series of questions related to key observations that we already made during our observation and analyzing the first part of the data. Right. So that you can do. But what I'm saying is that doing longitudinal study, because afterward I stayed like 2 years afterwards with the REG to discover new things and to do other study. Actually, I did kind of an ethnography of the organization afterwards. And from my experience, you cannot plan in advance the richness of the events that you are going to see.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely. So thinking a little bit, so moving forward, we have 2 more questions, or there are coming more questions in the chat. So there's a question from Andrew from Toronto, and he asks about how to actually measure the individual impact or the individual development if you deliver an innovation training. So he is just about to start an innovation training workshop 1 day per week for 12 weeks to increase the innovation in engineers from 8 different oil and gas companies. Okay. And I think you address this individual impact, or how you actually then measured how people changed in your article. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little further.
Yeah, for sure. For me, this part was the easiest part. It was easy. It was very easy because we got a lot of data on the individual level. And so what I did, and I explained a little bit earlier, was to do an Excel spreadsheet with different moments of time, looking at all the individuals that were participants of the training, of the two cohorts. So I got like a 40 line, one line for each participant, with all of this moment of time, like before, during the first session, at the middle of the first training, at the end of the first training, at the end of the month after the training, 1 year after, and so on. And I grasped like the most relevant citation of their both behavior and discourses. And so I could see retrospectively very well this, the evolution in their discourse and behavior over time. And that's how I discovered the effect of the training at the individual level. So doing that, you can see this evolution. And I think the challenges in doing that is to pick the relevant second order concept. And for that, you have to, I think it's great to be like at least two on the field, because you can more easily discuss what you have seen and be both like faithful to the empirical material and relevant to the theory as well. So that's the balance that is sometimes difficult to keep.
Yeah.
To be faithful and to develop new theories, there is some aspect that is not quite simple to grasp.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, so Andrew, if you look at the article of Romain and Marine, there are several things they mentioning. So the researchers developed a new type of reasoning. They developed new skills like group facilitation or collaborative design activities. They and I think that is something I really like. There's a quote from you where they say, actually, many of them already somehow knew about these skills, but they never put them into practice. So to really apply things they might have read or they might have heard before, but really enabling them to use them. So Andrew, just from my perspective, what I would do is I would talk to the organization before, asking them, what you are expecting? And also ask the individuals, what are you expecting from this training? And then think together with them, so how can we measure it in the end? I mean, that would, just build the hypothesis with them.
Yeah, for sure. And just maybe one advice that I can do for you is we did not put that in the paper, or maybe we did, but only in the discussion part. But what our study has enabled us to learn is that the casting of the participant is key also, because you want to have participants with already a certain skills or personality trait or centrality in the organization, if you want for them to endorse like a new facilitator position. You don't want the participant that at the end has no time to do this kind of new posture that in trying to help innovation emerge in the organization. And so you need to select carefully, because also of the socialization aspect that we mentioned in the paper. So the more expertise and diverse individuals that you put in the training, the more socialization and between the participant and exposure to new knowledge will occur as well. So that was one key element that redoing the training, we will talk to the organization in explaining what kind of people and what kind of a mix of people we want in implementing this training.
And that fits perfectly to another question. I'm kind of regrouping the questions here, so don't worry. We'll get to the question also. And we have to be a little bit cautious with time, but this one really fits well. So Carlos from Mexico asks whether you observed other elements emerging, such as policy or practices that also affected the innovation capabilities other than the training. So I guess it's, you know, I mean, obviously an organization develops over time, but probably also, and I think you addressed that in the article as well, that also just by the training and the empowerment of the employees, also organizational practices did change, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, yeah, there is a lot of practices that emerge out of other things than the training. I think that what we are trying to say in this article is that the training is a way to impulse something else, to impulse new kind of innovation capabilities. But the training itself, it's not enough. And so with the training, the management of the organization also gave a lot more autonomy and time for the researcher in order to explore this new subject and to be able to grasp the evolution in the industry of energy. And so this autonomy, I think, was key in developing this new kind of radical innovation capabilities, because without this autonomy, the participant after the training will not have the time or the freedom to explore freely this kind of new subject. So that was the first element. I think a second element is you have to train the management as well. And I think like some manager were present during the training. And I think you have to change also the criteria of evaluation that you expect out of new projects if you want like some major change to evolve. And so another element that was key was the flexibility that the manager just gave the employees in exploring, even though the knowledge was not very mature, or the feasibility aspect of of a new project will not have as which is maturity. And so I think that was also a key aspect in developing this kind of new innovation capabilities.
Right, thank you. All right, so we have two more questions, so I'll ask for a little bit of a short answer. Leonie from Denmark, from Aalborg, asked, do you think that your involvement as a researcher actually influenced the process and the final outcomes?
Shorter answer to a complex question, for sure. So thanks, Leonie. It's an next question. I think, yeah, for sure, you cannot deny the implication of the researcher. And I think like for me, for the first part, I was a neutral observer, not doing some things, but Marine was actively implied in the field. So she facilitated a lot of teams, showing them what to do, what not to do with her background, with her experience. The training by itself is a form of intervention from the outside to the organization. So I think, yeah, you are responsible for some of the changes that you impulse in the organization, and that's why I think the bet that Marine took at first was to get me on board and to have a more neutral researcher in the field. And I think I cannot say that for the first an influence. On later stages, I will say that I took a more active role with the participant doing some kind of intervention myself, but that was not the case for this kind of paper. And you have to, I think that my internet connection broke.
No, you're still there. You're a little bit, but that's fine. No worries.
Okay. And so later on, I had a huge influence on the organization, but not for this specific for this specific aspect. But for sure you always have an intervention, and you have to recognize that in your study. And I think that in our article we could recognize this fact very well.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Last question. And that is actually a very, very big question. So I think you need to maybe pick one. So the question comes from Umesh from India. And they ask, what kind of training in innovation and creativity can lead to radical transformation in your experience through this research?
1 minute, you go. Yeah, for sure. I will like decompose my answer in 3 parts. First of all, what we observed that was that explaining the fixation effect to the participant and the cognitive aspect and the psychology behind this effect was key. Because afterwards, when we talked to them, they were like, "Oh, I think I'm fixed. I think I cannot go outside the box," and it was a key element. The second aspect is the facilitation aspect and the training in order to be a facilitator. I think it's a key, it's a central position that organizations that want to do some major innovation need to have. And so not all participants will at the end be facilitator or have the possibility to be, but you need to in your training maybe to add some training in order to be a facilitator. And third is like whatever the tools and methodology, and there is many in creativity and innovation that you give the participant. It could be like design thinking or Seika theories and so on. You have to give them new methodology and collective methodology in order for them to work together. And we think what was key for us was the collective language that emerged out of it as well. And so be sure that this language, whatever the method that you use, is disseminated to the organization.
Right. Excellent. Wow, that was a very good answer to a very complex question. Thank you. So let's wrap it up. I think we hopefully gave you a good understanding and a first glimpse into a very fascinating paper. So if you haven't done so, please read it. I think this is great research, and I really hope to see some more coming out of Montreal from Romain and Marine.